Nico Nicholas. He's the CEO of Trees4Travel. And this morning, he's going to talk about how we perhaps have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to really get to grips with sustainability with respect to our travel activity and how we can make a real difference to what we're doing with respect of addressing the current climate issues. So to that end, I'd like to hand over to Nico to provide his presentation.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for being here. And it's really exciting to meet everyone. It'd be great to meet you all in real at some point in the near future. And, hopefully, we can all help to get to that day. Anyhow, yeah, I'm the founder of Trees4Travel, and I've got a presentation here, which, Andy, could you go to the first slide, please, when you're ready? So we set this company up in 2020, and it's based on the most simple method of offsetting CO2, and it's basically Trees4Travel. So if you, next slide, please. Shall I? So we decided to do this because more than ever, we really needed to consider the sensitive link between travel and the environment. We started hearing about flight shame, and COVID-19 really highlighted travel's environmental impact. But what we felt that the current offset programs were really complicated, poorly understood, and there was nothing tangible behind it. So we felt that we needed to change that and try to make something that's more tangible that everybody could actually understand and engage with. So next slide, please. So basically, we did this as well because as CO2 is produced, we are increasing the temperatures of our planet, and and in May 2020, we entered into the most dangerous CO2 levels to date. And this year, we're still going to be 50% higher than pre-industrial concentrations. By the way, please don't read the words on the screen. This is actually something we're going to share after the presentation. So in 2020, the global surface temperature was one of the warmest years on record. And in turn, this causes severe weather patterns such as floods, droughts, storms, and crop failures. What's happened? Next. Yeah. Now, travel accounts actually only for around 8% of CO2 emissions, and only between 2 and 3% really comes from air travel. The elephant in the room is really power generation, deforestation, and road transport. And whilst we actually appreciate that we really got to reduce our consumption and cut our emissions from drawing existing carbon out of the atmosphere, we also know that it's going to take effort from all areas, but we could use travel as a positive element of actually reducing CO2 in those other more important sectors. And basically, it's because travel is it's an expensive product, and offsetting is actually very inexpensive. So here you can see that power generation is actually 25% and deforestation is 20%. So if we all stopped flying, the maximum benefit we would achieve would be between 2 and 3%. But if we actually use travel to offset power generation, deforestation, we could actually do a lot more good for our planet. Next, please. So this is a graph of the Earth's overshoot day. Now, the Earth actually does a really good job at offsetting most of our emissions. The green bar is the date in the year when the Earth has basically been exhausted of what we have actually thrown at it. And since 1970, it's been getting progressively later up until last year, when obviously COVID reduced travel and we all stayed at home, and there was a 7% later in the year overshoot day. The idea is actually better, is actually to really not have an overshoot day. But to get that, we obviously need to draw down lots of CO2. But at the same time, you can see that the Earth is still actually managing to absorb roughly 2/3 of what we're emitting. So it's not an impossible task, and there is a safe level that we can achieve quite easily, and it's just about really balancing this out. Next slide, please, Andy. So we know that you know, no one country, leader, company, or individual can solve the climate crisis. You know, we believe though that we need to work together, because the climate change is actually affecting our lives everywhere. You know, from forest fires to flooding to, you know, the more and more extreme weather that we're getting is destroying our homes and our livelihoods and our environment. But every single degree Celsius that increases on our surface temperature, or the temperature of the planet, 7% humidity increases, and that is actually creating a lot more weather, you know, like rain and storms. And you know, Mother Nature is going to win this battle, whether we like it or not. So we need to take care of her, and we also understand though that science is working, but we believe that if we can actually, you know, people are bringing electric vehicles into play. We're working on hydrogen planes. You've got all of this, you know, green energy happening. However, we do feel that whilst that is going on, we can actually do some good and actually repair some of the damage we've done. And what we're trying to do is to offer a natural way of doing this, so that we can actually help people travel more mindfully, and you know, improve our planet while we're improving our travel methods. So our next slide, please. So our aim is actually to harmonize travel with our environment. And you know, in 2019 there were more of us traveling and emissions were increasing, and that's actually set to happen again. You know, we have slowed down, and you know, COVID has actually given us a chance to sort of like take a step back and look at what we're doing. But there, you know, travel is still such an important part of our lives, and so really we want to harmonize travel with our environment, and we do that through collaborating and educating each other, and actually really trying to sort of like, you know, travel with this sort of like natural world in our minds as well, but also, you know, taking into consideration when we're taking trips, and how we're actually going to help to reduce our emissions. And to do that, we really felt that we needed something that had a very simple message and something that was tangible, so that travelers could really engage with this as well. So besides the corporates, we go right down to the traveler level if that's required, and that actually helps the traveler actually engage as well. So next slide, please. So we're actually a part of the World Economic Forum and United Nations Environment Programme, and that's to ensure the conservation restoration of 1 trillion trees within this next 10 years. And, you know, being one of the largest industries in the world, travel is, you know, we believe that engaging travel and, you know, with this, we actually feel that we can actually deliver really, really important change, and really help with biodiversity and sustainable development goals. And we feel that together we actually have the power to really help our planet. So next slide, please. So we chose trees because as they grow, they absorb the CO2 and they release the oxygen back into the air, and they store the carbon in their trunks and in their roots. But most importantly, there used to be 6 trillion trees on Earth, and now only 3 trillion remain. But even so, we still have about 900 million hectares of tree restoration potential. And it's also considered, tree planting is actually considered to be one of the most cost-effective methods of offsetting CO2. And in fact, we know of no other carbon drawdown solution that actually has this same ability. But trees actually do a lot more than that. They actually, you know, they clean the air, but they also filter the water. They reduce erosion. They provide a habitat to over 80% of the world's wildlife. 1.6 billion people work through forests. You know, they have their jobs and their livelihood from it. 25% of our medication comes through forests, and you know, it also supports local communities, because you know, people can actually, they can feed from the forests. They can actually earn money from agroforestry, where they can collect fruits and things like this. But most importantly, trees are something that everybody understands. They're impactful, they're affordable, and they're actually also, they're just something that we can really engage with and really connect with. Next slide, please. So the way we work is that we actually use it for our voluntary carbon offset. We have two different types of working. So we have our voluntary carbon offset, which shows the growth rates, and this is an approximation based on a hardwood tree, a typical hardwood tree. And taking a baby sapling that absorbs 6 kilos of CO2 in its first year, we actually give the first 10 years of the tree's absorption to the corporate or the traveller. And then after that period of from year 11 to the tree's full life expectancy, the tree will go on to absorb a total of around 3 tons of CO2. Now, what we do is we give those first 10 years to the traveller. After those 10 years, the trees remain in the account. But what we don't do is we don't resell the trees, and we don't give the traveller the future CO2 to offset, because what we're trying to do is we're actually trying to become carbon positive and actually repair some of the historic damage that we've done. So that's that slide. Could you go to the next slide, please, Andy? So our certified carbon units is the other way that we work, which is when we need to, when a corporate needs to have mandatory offsetting. What we do is we will invest in we've got an Amazonian conservation project of 40,000 hectares. This land was going to be basically felled. So, it's going to be turned into grazing land, and the charity that we're supporting purchased the land. They created schools and medical centres so that they basically can train the adults, not just the kids, but they train the adults to really learn how to care for the forests and how to live alongside the forests. Because besides planting and rewilding, which is our voluntary version of offset, we also, it's also really important that we actually protect what we've already got. So this is a way of actually mixing both the rewilding and the repairing damage with actually protecting forests. And because the forests are already existing, we can actually provide certified carbon units, which are publicly, they're measured by public third parties, and then the certificate numbers are actually then issued in a public database as the CO2 is retired, and that can be used for mandatory offset. So it's something which is a choice from our corporates. Next slide, please. So the voluntary carbon units is what is with our tree planting. And this is where we will select and vet local partners and organisations who basically will work on restoration, biodiversity. We really focus on forests which are going to have the maximum impact for the benefit of the locals and the environment. I think next slide, please, Andy. So yeah, we basically only plant trees that are indigenous to a region so that we can ensure a high survival rate. And we make sure that the partners that we're working with are robust, and also that they have people so they engage with the communities, because if you don't engage with the community, then the community will then go and destroy the work that you've done. And we also really prioritize projects that restore the forests and biodiversity and help the welfare of local communities so that they really can engage with it. But most importantly, like I showed on the earlier slide, where we sort of like keep the trees for life, we do not invest in monoculture, which is when you have palm oil trees or bamboo, which is going to be felled and then sold. So we don't actually invest in farming projects. This is all about actually repairing the damage, so forest fires, floods, etc., etc. So that's what we do. Next slide, please. So we do have also an option of for larger corporates, we can do legacy forests. Now this is a forest where we can actually add the name of the corporate to the forest. It's sometimes digital. It has to be something which we confirm with the plantation, but it's something that can also be a really, really engaging thing to do. We've got some corporates that we work with who have their own land as well, which we can arrange to have planted. And we also have this rotating widget which can be added to our partners' websites, which shows a collaborative achievement that we've all made together. It's not just about what you've done on your own, it's about what all of our partners are doing together, and how much CO2 will be absorbed and how many trees have been planted. And it's about really trying to show that how the engagement and being able to share that engagement, because the more people can see the engagement, the more people actually understand what is really being done behind the scenes. So we feel that's a really important part. Next slide, please. So we have a very accurate calculator, and this covers all types of air transport, road transport. We can do trucks as well as cars. So, you know, it's electric car to diesel car to bus to coach to rail to trucks loaded or unloaded. We even cover cruise and ferry. We can do foot passengers on a ferry. And we also have an approximation for hotels and rental accommodation. And we're even adding an average for hire cars, because what we do as well is we try to take a sensible approach to this. So basically, we feel that when there's over detail, people won't engage. So if we were to ask everybody to tell us how much mileage they did and what car it was when they do a rental, we don't believe it would actually, we wouldn't get that information, and therefore we wouldn't be doing any offset. So we've basically taken like, you know, approximation of the age of a hire car when it's sold and the average mileage, and then we've taken that over the number of days that that the car's life has been done, and then with a rental, how many days the rental is. So it works out about 21 kilos a day on average for a rental. Next slide, please. So we work with both current and historic offsetting. So with historic offsetting, and a lot of our partners are using this as a way to see what offset would cost. So we can receive historic data, we can process that historic data, say for example 2019, and then we can show what that would have cost to offset. And we also, however, work with the future. So, you know, current, we can be fed with, I think next slide, we can be fed with data through API, so it can be live data, or we can work on a simple file upload. So monthly we can receive a file upload from Meon, and basically what happens then is that we will then give a quote for that previous month's departed trips. So we don't actually quote on trips that have not been completed. And we only plant for trips that have been completed, and then we'll plant the trees in your name, and then you also receive monthly reports from us showing how much CO2 has been emitted versus how much CO2 has been absorbed, and we always aim to offset all of the CO2 within 10 years. So that's what the report will show as well. Next slide, please. So you get access to a dashboard. Now this dashboard shows you how many trees you've planted. You can actually access the locations of the trees. We give satellite imagery. We're giving pictures to show, you know, what's going on with the plantations you've invested in. You can see all your trips within our dashboard. And we also have an allowance. So if you've given us historic data, or you know how much you sort of like on average use per month, your emissions per month, we can actually send an email when you reach 20% of a month's bookings or 40%, and then you can decide either, well, maybe we should look at reducing our travel class, or maybe we should look at moving a trip to another month. So it helps you, it's kind of like part of that educational side where you can kind of like really just understand, and it's making visible what your actual offset is, and what your emissions are, so that you can make a better informed decision about what you're doing. Next slide, please. So this is an example of the email which you would receive when you reach 40%. There's no block, so we don't stop you booking. It is purely educational. Next slide, please. So you also have access to a dashboard which you can run reports on. You can do reports by cost center. You can do reports by airline, by route, by traveler, by region, whatever you want. So you can actually, and you can date those reports. And next slide, please. And you can view that data as well in a graphical format. So in this case, we're showing by class, by travel class, so you're seeing how much business travel, and this is related to air only, but we're also adding another pie chart here, which will show the differences between rail and air and road. So you can see where you're actually emitting your, where your emissions are coming from. But if you're over the black line on the graph at the bottom of the screen, the line graph, the black line are your actual emissions. The orange line is your monthly allowance. So you can see in this case, the actuals are over your allowance. So what you can do here is you can actually do a what if scenario where you can say, well, what if my short haul flights that were business class were actually economy? And we're actually going to even add on to there, what if my domestic flights were rail? So if you're flying, economy, you can say, what if my domestic economy flights were rail? And then you can actually see, so again, you can kind of like play with that data, and you can actually see the differences in your emissions according to how you travel. Next slide, please. And this is actually a comparison against other businesses. This is all of the data we hold, and you can see how you compare. And we're working on this still as well, so we can actually show by sector. So if you're a pharmaceutical company, you can see how much other pharmaceutical companies travel. You can see how much their travelers travel. You can see how much business class they travel, etc., etc. Again, it's a bit of a visibility. It's just some way of actually engaging with what we're doing and what we're emitting. Next slide, please. So now travel is, it has such an amazing benefit to our planet. Besides having some emissions, it actually is responsible for around 7% of international trade. It produces, 1 in 10 jobs are through travel. And the thing is that if we engage our travel with doing the right thing and trying to do it in the right way, we can have, by looking at these numbers, we actually feel that we can really, really bring a massive benefit to the planet, and we can really make travel something positive. So next slide, please. So what we've created is we've created like a sustainable travel community. So you've got like a central carbon pot, and your trips will be added by your TMC. You'll be able to purchase trees through them, but you'll also be able to collect trees through ways of, like when you hire a car through some companies, they will donate a tree, which will go into that central carbon pot. You be able to use airline points, so frequent flyer points, if you wanted to offset as well. Hotels, you could even, some hotels like you could actually choose to not have your room cleaned one day, and then they would actually purchase a tree for you in place of cleaning your room. So there are lots of ways, and your central carbon account is something which will be visible, and you'll be able to see where you stand as a corporate. So you can actually find different ways of offsetting besides just actually having the trees sold. So next slide, please. Now, this is actually a bit of a dream scenario slide. It's not something that we think is possible. And like I said earlier, we believe in scientific improvement as well, such as electric vehicles and stuff. The orange line is actually the emissions per year based on 2019 figures of 4.3 billion airline passengers. This is 880 billion kilos of CO2 produced by airline travel. And we're not by any way suggesting just plant 1.5 trees with each flight and then don't worry about it. But the thing is that what this shows is this does show the enormous potential that nature holds, because if we had been doing this 20 years ago, the grey line is the accumulating CO2 that airline is emitting, and the blue line is the absorption of trees if each traveller was purchasing 1.5 trees with any flight. Doesn't matter which class you're flying or distance. But if that was the case, then 10 years air travel without any scientific improvement would actually be neutral. And after 17 years, with some technical improvement, such as perhaps hydrogen planes or electric aircraft, you would actually, the trees that the airlines would have paid to offset, the trees that they would have planted, would actually be absorbing more CO2 than the air travel had actually emitted, which is really quite shocking and quite amazing at the same time. Next slide, please. So train is actually the most economical way to travel. 1,000 miles produces only 41 kilos per passenger, and a train line can actually carry 50,000 people per hour compared to only 2,500 on a motorway. So you can see how having train, it's a very slick way of traveling. And unless we are all going to cycle or walk everywhere, then this is one of the best ways to go. And this is actually an example of how efficient rail travel is. London to Paris with 3 nights in a hotel is just 1 tree. So you're talking about a really, really minimum cost there. I mean, it's £2 a tree. So you're talking about a very, very tiny requirement to actually offset the trips. Next slide, please. Now, even motor vehicles. Now, we talk about, electric hybrid vehicles, and we know that, lithium batteries, there's a lot of talk about lithium being bad and all this, but I believe that, and there's proof to show that lithium batteries, battery technology is improving, batteries are being recycled now, and I believe that the issue will be a lot less. However, this shows a standard diesel car. Okay, and this shows that if you travel 1,000 miles by car, that is going to be 2 trees. So London to Manchester with 2 nights in a hotel, it actually works out just 1 tree. And 1 tree actually can cover the cost of cover the emissions of a tank of diesel. So it's quite crazy that we haven't done this before, but we haven't. And again, I must stress that I'm not saying just plant trees and don't change. We've got to change from all different areas because we've got some catching up to do. So we hope that that will actually be what we're doing. So next slide, please. So we really, really feel that all travel needs to actually have a new focus. We feel that actually planting trees is one of the best ways of doing this whilst technology improves. And actually 72% of travellers, according to booking.com, feel that we need to act now and we need to start thinking more about how to travel more sustainably. And actually, if there is anything beneficial to take out of COVID, it might be the fact that we've had our eyes opened. And our ambition is actually to do this better than anybody else is doing this type of offset, so that's what we're hoping, that you will join us, that we can help you, and that we can plant some trees together and fix some of the damage we've done. Last slide, please. Thank you very much. And I'm available if anybody does want to have a conversation directly with me. Please contact Meon, and we'll arrange something. We can have a meeting. I can take you through. If you've got a team or something who want to know more, I'm happy to be grabbed and take you through a presentation again. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Nico. I think that's the 3rd time I've seen the presentation, and I learn something new every time. I find it absolutely fascinating. We also, for all of the attendees, we will be sharing more detail on our partnership after the presentation in the coming days. So we look forward to any questions that you may have, and look forward to opportunities to introduce you in person to Nico. I would like to open the floor now to questions. If you do have a question, you can either type it into the chat box and I'll ask on your behalf, or if you're feeling brave and you'd like to sort of come up on the screen in person, we can try and arrange that, technology permitting, for you as well. Okay, so any questions? Let me just check the chat. Nothing in so far, so I'll start with a question if that's okay, everybody. Nico, what's the difference between voluntary carbon units and certified carbon units?
Well, voluntary is basically to do with when you're planting trees, and we always plant trees that are not having the carbon sold. Okay, there's something in the industry which you know, there have been some scams with tree planting, where you know the trees are actually being planted, but the carbon is being sold. So it's kind of like considered as what we call in this side of offset as double dipping. So what happens is that basically what you're doing is you are, so I'm just going to go back to gallery because it's a bit, so basically what happens is that tree planting companies or organizations will plant the trees, but they will sell the carbon offset to someone else. So you think you're offsetting your carbon, but you're not. So even though we do voluntary, we ensure that all of the plantations that we work with are not reselling their carbon. Now with certified is actually where there's a third party who go in, they measure the carbon, and they actually give a certificate, which is then issued on, you have serial numbers of the certificates, which is actually listed on a third party database. And that would be either Gold Standard or Vera or something like this. And those certificates are then able to be used for mandatory offset. Most companies who require that tend to be energy. Some legal firms want that. If somebody wants that, then we're absolutely fine with it, but the projects will vary. Pricing is the same. We still use trees as our base to sort of like, so that we can like connect the trips with trees, because we feel also that's something that's really understandable. But the fact is that it's not, we're not planting one tree for you. We're actually going to issue certificates, and that will be to conserve forests, or could even be other, it could be a hybrid of other renewable energy or whatever, but that's where the certificates come in.
Okay, and you mentioned that unfortunately in the past there's been some unscrupulous schemes that have been out in the sort of for people to buy into. How do you select the schemes that you work with?
Well, I mean, this is kind of like you're going back when we talk about unscrupulous schemes. It's kind of like very often been like monoculture plantations, planting the wrong trees in the wrong place without doing enough research. So what we do is we actually take advice from Kew Gardens, but we also work with the Crowther Lab. So Tom Crowther is the guy who actually kind of like really started doing research about tree planting and the effects on our emissions and how important it is. But what we also mustn't get caught up in is we must never forget that trees do so much more. But what we do is we don't invest in, I mean, Julian, there are some apps which will say, plant a tree for $1 and we will pay you $20 in 10 years. Now, what those are doing is they're actually getting you to pay for the tree to be planted, and then they're chopping the tree down and they're selling it. So you're not really benefiting anyone by doing that. So there are lots of different ways doing it, but our ambition is really to protect and to rewild and to really ensure that we really are bringing down our emissions.
Okay. Okay, and we've just had a question in from Hayley. She's basically said that her company holds large events as well as having sort of more transient travel. Are you able to help with the carbon offsetting for the events and the people that are involved in traveling to and from those events?
Absolutely. I mean, we actually have, we've created, it's not online, it's not a sort of like automated system, but we have a spreadsheet that can be used for event management, for meetings, for hotels as well, offices. And basically what it does is you put in your consumption. If it's like even if it's an exhibition and you've got a stand in the exhibition, you can actually work out if the exhibition hall is a part of this, then we can actually go right down to stand level, so people can actually see. Not, I mean, one of the things that we're really trying to sort of demystify here is when someone says, "Oh, that's 150 kilos of CO2," nobody really understands that. So what we would say is that's a tree. So it's actually connecting all of our like emissions to trees. And then we're offering various ways of actually carrying that emission through or offsetting that emission. So
Okay.
I hope that answers the question.
I hope so. And final question then from Paul. I think you sort of touched upon this slightly. How do you ensure that biodiversity is maintained and that the schemes are appropriate to the local environment?
Well, we work with really, really good charities and tree planting organisations. And for example, our first forest is actually, well, we've done part of one in Scotland, but now we're actually working with one in British Columbia, and that's a reforestation of a where there was forest fires. Now, with that, we're working with a tree planting organisation, but we've also connected with the BC government, the sort of like, you know, the local councils, and they've got their own carbon measurement as well. So we ensured that what we're doing with them is actually compliant according to our requirements. And with our requirements, we're working with so many, you know, we're in a privileged position to have had so many fantastic brands and companies join us, that, you know, we would be dead in half a second if we didn't do this properly. So we really have to make sure that we are planting the right thing in the right place, and we're also sending people out there when we can to actually check that the forests are being done properly. And part of what we do as well is that we focus on one forest at a time. So by focusing on one forest at a time, we ensure that it's large enough to warrant sending someone out there to take photos, to engage with the community, to make sure that the job's really being done properly. And then we share that, and we give content for newsletters. So we share that so you can actually continue sharing that story as well. And we also have like in-house PR, which we can help with. You know, if there's an opportunity, then we can work with our travel partners and also corporates who are using our services if there's an opportunity for their industry to promote this message, because this message is for everyone's good. And you can also visit our forests if you're in the area. So
there we go. Next time I'm in British Columbia. Brilliant. Thank you, Nico. There's no more questions come in, but I'm sure, as I say, we look forward to sort of promoting our partnership in the coming weeks. Thank you so much for your time this morning. And look forward to obviously working with you moving forwards. Thank you, Nico.
Thank you. Thanks so much.